So, hello everybody, welcome back. This is another video from my tech blog, Tech Taco Friday. My name is Hector, and today is a follow-up. And actually, I'm with this fulfilling a promise that I published in my article about a more detailed description of the solution that I propose in the article to the question, to the problem of one of the people that contact me was having with deployment pipelines. And his question was, in a nutshell, why my deployment pipelines override Lakehouse shortcuts. So as you can see in this article, I explain that it is, let's say, it is the normal behavior for a deployment pipeline to behave like that. And from the automation perspective, you need to do certain steps in order to configure your deployment environments, right? So basically the idea is in any deployment that when you're working on your dev environment, the dev environment is connected to dev resources. And when you're working with your upper environments, let's say UAT production, UAT being connected to UAT resources, production to production resources. So that's the main idea. Now, in Fabric, one of the main features on Lakehouses are shortcuts. And then we would like to follow the same principle. That is a shortcut in development connected to development resources, production to production resources. And the question is how to make it happen in Fabric. So today, I'm going to show you how. All right. So I'm going to jump right into the demo that I have prepared for you. And actually, the first thing that I'm going to show you is how I'm simulating the conditions of the problem, right? So first of all, I'm going to show you the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 that I'm using as the source of the files that it will be ingested through my Lakehouse shortcut, right? So in this case, for simplicity, I'm going to use the same storage account, right? The same storage account in Azure. It's an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, but I'm having two different containers. One called CSV files-dev, and as you can see, it contains just one file called contosoproducts.csv. And I have another container called CSV files-production, right? And there's three files with the actual data that I wanted to process in production, right? So the Lakehouse, the shortcut in depth should point to this container, right? And the Lakehouse shortcut in production should point to this container. Fair enough? All right. So this is what I'm going to do. Now, the first step that we need to do in order to create a shortcut in a Lakehouse is to create a connection, right? So we are going to go in Fabric to settings and then manage connection and gateways, right? And under this, you need to click new, and I'm going to create a cloud connection. I'm going to name it CNX connection, that's short for connection, and then Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 _. And in my case, I'm going to call it CSV files and then development, right? The type combination is Azure Data Lake Lake Storage Gen 2, right? The server, obviously the server is going to be the one pointing to my Lakehouse, right? Azure Lakehouse here. And then I'm going to have the full path to be pointing to this container, right? So I already done this. So just to make it quick, I'm going to show you how the connection when it's already being configured, right? So as you can see here, we have my server and we have my full path pointing to development. And for production, I'm going to do a similar operation, but in production, as you can see, we will be pointing to CSV files-production as I explained before, as I previously prepared my environment to work like this, correct? Now, we have the connections. So that's the first step that we need to have. Now, before I move to the next or back to the Lakehouse, I want you to notice that each connection has a connection ID. And this number, we will have to have it handy because when we configure variables, we are going to need this number. So I just wanted to show you right now that the numbers that I'm going to put in my variables are coming from the connection ID on each of the connections that I created. Okay, fair enough. Now, let's go back to my Lakehouse. Now, in my Lakehouse, I have a workspace, and we obviously we would like to start with the workspace dev. And as you can see, I already have a Lakehouse right here. So I'm going to click on it. And the first step is creating my shortcut. So how do we do this? We go to files. Let's create a new shortcut. Let's use it in this case, an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, the connection that I just showed you, right? -dev. Let's click on next. And then the bucket or directory by default is this one. So let's click on dev. For simplicity's sake, I'm not going to transform any of the files. That's not important for the time being. We just need to create and show the files being pulled from the storage, right? So I'm just going to click skip. And then we are going to create. Now, I want you to know that I'm going to do an extra step here. It's not required, but I strongly suggest you to have the, let's say, the best practice of creating your shortcuts to be to name your shortcuts being environmentless. What I mean by that. So my shortcut, I'm gonna name it without the -dev. And there's a reason, and there's a practical reason. It's a good practice because regardless, you don't need the dev, right? Because what it will indicate whether the shortcut's data coming from dev.urt is not the name, it's the connection behind it, right? So by renaming your shortcut as without the dev, it's easier for you to transition among environments, and you will see it a little bit better when I show you the notebook that I created and how by removing this, it will be simpler for you to develop. All right, so that's a quick explanation. Bear in mind and put a pin on this thought, and I'm just going to rename my Lakehouse shortcut to be environmentless. All right, environment agnostic, probably you could say. All right, now as expected, right? And I don't know if you remember that in my development environment, I just have one file called Contoso Products. In my production, we have 3, all right? All right. So as expected, I can see this one, fine. Everything's good so far. Now, if you click on the ... and I go to manage shortcut, you will see that within the properties of a shortcut, we have different information, different properties. In addition to the name, we have the target, connection, location, and subpath. And you can see this one that all of this can receive a variable value. So it's important, take a note of that, because the next step is to create a variable library, right? So let's go back to our workspace. Now I have one here that I will open, but let me show you where can you create one, right? So I'm just going to click on create, and under data factory, you can see it right here, the variable library. As of September the 30th this year, actually I'm recording this video on October the 3rd. So 3 days ago, this feature went from preview to general available. So before September 30th, you need to activate this feature. Now you don't have to do it. It's generally available. So this is really important. And this is an indication of how fast and how fast Fabric is releasing new features, right? Okay, so bottom line, we have a general availability. We don't have to go to the prerequisites. So click on the variable library, name it. Let's say variable in my case, I call it DF because it's coming from Data Factory, and then barleaf underscore environment. So I already did that, and I'm going to show you the one that I already have, right? So let's go to the workspace, again, dev, and I'm going to open this variable library that I previously created. And here's the cool thing, right? So to begin with, as I mentioned before, we will have to create several variables. So let me take this one for you to see side by side how this is going to work, right? So in my left-hand side, I'm seeing the connection for dev. And this is the values. And I created 3 variables, one called target connection, target location, and target subpath. Those are the 3 properties that we are going to modify in our shortcut, in our Lakehouse shortcut. Remember? Okay. So target connection. Target connection, I'm going to use the connection ID from my connection. Now, the target location would be the server. In this case, the location is the server of my Lakehouse, right? Azure Lakehouse, storage Lakehouse. And the subpath, in this case, is going to be dev, right? Okay, so I created these 3 variables. But thinking ahead and thinking in our original problem, then we will have to transition our Lakehouse in dev to a production environment. In this case, I'm just having dev in production. So I'm going to push through deployment pipelines the dev Lakehouse to our production. So what does that mean? In production, we need a different set of values, right? For our connection, for our target location, and for our target subpath. So here is the important part of Lakehouse of variables libraries, because if you notice here, we can click on add a value data set. So if I click it, let's say that I'm going to add a new value set called production, because that value set will contain my production values, right? Environment values. So I already have it. So I'm just going to show you how you do it. So you click add the value set. I'm going to name it production. And then you will have in your right side different type of alternative value sets. I can create more. In this case, I just created one additional called production. And in my production environment, I guess that you can start thinking or seeing where this is going, right? I'm gonna add in my production, my connection ID for production, my target location for production, and in this case, the path or the subpath for my production files, right? Okay. Notice one more thing before I jump and going back to the Lakehouse, that in this case, since I'm working right now in my dev environment, I have my default value set to be development, right? Okay, now you can see set as active is my default environment, production is not the default. Okay, fair enough. Now, with this in mind, I'm gonna go back to my, variable environment. Everything is configured. I'm gonna go to my manage shortcuts. And what I'm gonna do now is you can do it 2 ways, right? You can edit variables here. I guess the most convenient way to do it is going to the actual property and click select variable, right? I'm gonna click it, and then I'm gonna pick, in this case, the connection from the target connection. So select variable, and notice how there's gonna be an association of this property to the variable file that I just created, right? We're gonna do the same for location. So I'm gonna pick the location and select the variable, right? And the subpath, the same thing. I'm gonna select the variable and I'm gonna pick the subpath variable. So there it goes. And now at this point of time, the properties are linked to those variables. Hence, they will use the values located for those values in the value set that is set as a default, right? So with that in mind, I can now go into my deployment. right? Because that's the next step. So we have the values for dev, the values for production. We have our Lakehouse, we have our Lakehouse and our shortcuts created and configured and linked to the proper variables. Okay, fine. Now, the next step is going to my deployment pipelines. I already created a deployment pipelines with 2 stages, one development, one production. I mean, also wanted to show you that my production workspace right now doesn't have anything, right? But then I'm going to my deployment pipelines. I'm going to assign my production workspace right now to this stage. And then without further ado, I'm going to deploy it, right? If you're familiar with this process, you will see that we have that's going to deploy the Lakehouse and the variables, the variable library that we define in the dev, right? Okay, so again, put a pin on this one because this is going to be important. Now, while we are waiting for our production deployment to complete, well, actually, this is going to take just a few seconds. We can wait a little bit. There it goes. Yes. So let's go to the workspace. Now both environments are in sync. And, you know, I guess it won't be a surprise for you based on the definition of the problem that the same as we have it configured our environment in dev is now working in production, right? But production, fetching the values from a dev location. That's not what we want. But now we have the variable library in place. So what are we going to do? Okay, now that we deploy it, let's go to my workspace in production, right? And and this is the tricky part. Let's go to my environment library and let's make for production the value set production to be the active or the default for this workspace. Just by clicking here, I'm going to set this active. So that means that the values that I have in my Lakehouse shortcuts now will have to fetch the values from this value set, from the value set that it's activated or defined as default. All right, let's save it. And now here comes the cool part, because now we will go to our production. Let's go to our Lakehouse, right? We notice that our shortcuts, right, are pointing to different variables, but they're still pointing to our development values. We need to do one additional step, which is update all the variables. All right, so let's click it. And then again, the new values for those variables will be fetched from the production value set. All right, and if everything works as expected, I'm gonna refresh, and then instead of having my Lakehouse pointing to my dev, now it's pointing to my production. Right? So that's exactly what we want. Now we have all these things pointing to production. Right? Now you may think, okay, so and what if I win in what? I mean, do we have to redeploy this one every time? And the answer is no. The answer is no, because by setting the default data set to production on my production environment does not trigger any changes in my production, which is perfect because that's exactly what we need. Just making the default value set to each environment allows us just to use different values or different environment values on each of the environments as we want, right? So we can now go to our development environment, keep developing, keep deploying the Lakehouse, deploy it, and those shortcuts that we have won't be overwritten anymore. So, and it will contain or it will keep the same location per environment as we always want it to be. So how's that? Is it that cool or what, right? So I know that this is a lot of steps in back and forth, so I thought that it would be better for me to show you in a video. So I hope you like it, but most importantly, as I always said, I hope it is useful for your work. So I wish you best of lucks and talk to you in the next video. All right. See you.